Well, hey, everybody. Getting ready to record this week's Mike in the Midwest, back from Walt Disney World. Oh, about 48 hours ago, less than that. And yeah, so we're going to have some fun. Let's talk about bowling alleys around St. Louis. Bowling alley memories, because I have some. All right, let's do this. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 137 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the amazing patrons just like you of the Be Our Guest podcast. Of course, my name is Mike Rallman, host of the Be Our Guest podcast. You can find me on the social media at Be Our Guest Mike. So check me out, usually on Twitter or Instagram. Love to connect with you if we have not done that before. I bet we have, but if we haven't, make that happen this week. So coming over, let's have some discussion. And I hope you're enjoying the main feed of the Be Our Guest podcast. We had a great trip report with listener Eric on yesterday's show. He went down to Wilderness Lodge, had some solo time, had some time with his Disney best friend, and his brother came down as well for part of the trip. Just a great trip report. Eric kind of took over, which was nice because as I was recording that show last week, hours before leaving for Princess Half Marathon weekend, I was actually fighting through a raging migraine headache, but I wanted to make sure we had the show out there. Eric said, "No problem. I've got you, Mike." And he just went on and told stories, and he is an excellent storyteller. And we had a great show, I thought. I got to kind of sit back and just take in all of his dining experiences, his hotel review, his time in the theme parks, his thoughts on different experiences around horseback riding. And I just thought that was very cool. That's what I really do like about the big show, our big podcast that we have, is that every Wednesday night when I record the Monday shows, is that I get to sit in on somebody's vacation. And I hope that's what you guys feel when you get to listen to the shows on Mondays or whenever you listen to the Trip Report shows, is that every show on every Monday Trip Report show is a little bit different because you don't know really what you're going to get. Maybe it's a Pop Century stay, a solo stay that's very inexpensive. Maybe it's somebody's blowout trip where they stay club level at the Polynesian. Like I'll probably never do that. So when I get to hear about it, I'm like a bug in a rug because I'm not going to do that most likely, but it's cool to hear about what it would be like. And I try to imagine what it would be like myself to get to do that. Or, it's cool to just hear different perspectives on things. I still get to hear folks that it's almost their first time going to Walt Disney World. Well, I'm not going to have that again. And I remember what it was like, so I can relate to those trips. But it's fun to hear the excitement and the wonder about things when everything's fresh and new. It's like how I was when I went to Disneyland last July. I loved it. And we'll talk about that in just a second too. But first of all, we have breaking news here on the Be Our Guest podcast. And I got to get this out there to our patrons first. And this happened just right for today's Mike in the Midwest episode. You may have seen it on my social media earlier this morning that the Be Our Guest podcast family has increased by one baby this morning. That is right. Ricky and Brian had their baby this morning, which was we expected it to happen this week. We thought it would. Ricky said that if the baby did not arrive by Thursday, that she was probably going to go to the hospital and be induced for the baby. But it happened early this morning. I think around 8:35, 7 pounds, 7 ounces, I believe the baby was. Don't quote me on that. I have the text somewhere. But mom and dad and baby are doing wonderfully. I've gotten a few pictures of the baby. She is cute as pie. And yeah, so everybody's doing great down in Atlanta. So we have one additional mini podcaster in the Be Our Guest podcast family. So when you get a chance, she was immediately on her phone, which shocks me. I guess that's a difference because, my youngest is 15 years old. My wife was not, she's still not on social media, but I guarantee you she would not have been tweeting or texting or anything. Of course, Mallory was born in the middle of the night, like at around midnight. So I don't know how that would have gone, but, and my wife's also a very private person. So obviously you've never heard her on the podcast. She just does not get into the social media stuff, but, yeah, Ricky was immediately on there. So if you get a chance at Ricky Nibs, give her a shout out, give her congratulations. And we're super proud of her because they have been waiting on this baby for a very long time since really the second or third podcast cruise. They've been really wanting to have a child, and they've worked. She missed one of the podcast cruises because she was, they were trying to start a family. She didn't want to get Zika back when that was a thing. And today's the day it finally arrived in 2023. So it's kind of cool to see how God works, and sometimes makes you wait, but the wait is absolutely worth it. So we're excited for Brian and Ricky and the whole family, Donna and Rick, the grandparents. It's going to be an exciting time. And I keep laughing because Ricky has lived this life for the last, however long. I don't know exactly how old she is. I know she's younger than me. And because actually I substituted for her sixth grade class one time. So I'm older, but at Jamestown Elementary. But the thing is, Ricky's kind of been on her own schedule here for quite a long time, while Scott and Pam and myself, we've been raising kids. And so we've gone through the 3:12 a.m. diaper changes and feedings and all the stuff that goes with the terrible twos and the threes that don't get any better. She's got that all coming. And see, our kids, we're almost all three of us getting close to being empty nesters. I mean, our kids are in high school at the youngest. So it's going to be fun to see them going through the stuff that we went through. It's exciting stuff. So we're going to get to sit back and enjoy that I just could not do a toddler at this point. I just couldn't, but it'll be fun to watch Uncle Mike from here. That'll be cool. So congratulations to Ricky and Brian. We're super excited for them. Of course, I'm just back from Princess Half Marathon weekend. Had a good time. I will talk about all of my experiences at Princess on Friday's show. It's basically Friday's show is like a big Mike in the Midwest because Ricky was unavailable to record at that time. Actually, the irony is Ricky's on tomorrow's podcast. She does the listener question show. And we talk about the fact that on our podcast, we always make things happen. If we get a question about when do you think the tickets for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party are going to come out? And then because we record the shows on Monday, they come out on Wednesdays. What happens is stuff always happens on Tuesdays between when we say something may happen and when the show actually hits your feed on Wednesday, it has already happened. We joke on the show on tomorrow's podcast that she will have the baby before the show comes out. I am not kidding. So when you listen to the show tomorrow, I'm telling you, we have an uncanny knack about things like this happening. And it just happened again in real life with her having the baby this morning. So anyway, she's on the show tomorrow. We answer some questions, but Friday, Scott was still at Walt Disney World. Pam was changing resort. She was going from Margaritaville over to Saratoga Springs so she can get everything set up with her setup down there. And so I just took the reins and I talked for over an hour about staying at Coronado, about my first meal at Il Molino over at the Swan, fancy Italian. About our meal, we had a really good meal all together. Scott's family, Pam and Steve, at the boathouse. We had a good meal there one night. Just about the races. I talk about the 10K and the half marathon and the excitement of that, and just the weather. And we went to all four theme parks while we were there. We did some counter service meals. Columbia Harbor House was a hit. Had some great ice cream at the Plaza Ice Cream place. The weather was outstanding. It was hot, but it was fine. It was hot because it was hot in the afternoons, but it was nice and crisp in the evenings once the sun went down. It was just a really, really good weekend. It was a really good weekend. So I had a lot to say on Friday's show. So I really hope you enjoy that, but it's really like a Mike in the Midwest episode. So you're a Patreon. You've heard these before. It's me rambling for an hour. And so it's not the best effort. I wish that everybody would have been there to bounce things off of, but I don't want to miss a show. So that's what you get on Friday. So I really do hope you enjoy it. And then on next Monday's podcast, the plan is that I'm going to talk to Scott. He gets back tomorrow night, Wednesday night. Actually, he gets back tonight. Sorry, Tuesday night. And we're going to sit down tomorrow night and talk about his stay down for Princess, because he had a lot of different things than I did. He went down early because remember there was that mega snowstorm moving across the northern plains last week. So his flight was actually canceled. So he proactively went down about 36 hours before he was scheduled to go down. He stayed a couple of nights at Pop Century. He has some stories about that. It's hilarious. They turned off his water. He had no idea. They were in the shower at the time. I don't want to spoil the story. So we stayed a couple of nights at Pop Century. They stayed at Riverside while they were there. So we'll talk about the royal rooms at Riverside. He stayed longer than I did, obviously, by a couple of days. His daughter, Emily, ran her very first half marathon. So we'll talk about that. Daddy and daughter getting to do that together. They ran the 5K. I did not. So we can talk about that experience. So he'll have a lot of different experiences than I did to share beyond my stuff on Friday. And we just like recording together. So we'll have a good time on Monday's podcast. So you got a lot of good stuff coming your way over the next 3 episodes here on the show. So let's get going with the feedback from the last. That's kind of what's going on around here. Beautiful weather right now, though. It's like 60 and sunny outside. So it's not bad to come home to this. Could have been worse. No snow on the ground or anything like that. So last week I talked about my dad's odd jobs. I made road cases for instruments with his friend Darwin. He played in many bands and at a local steakhouse called Meadow Park Steakhouse. And I used to go up there and sing Elvira and the Gambler and kind of stuff like that. So here is what our feedback is from last week's show. And Trisha, my good friend up in Wisconsin, which I keep getting ads on Instagram for, what's the place with the train in the Dells? Oh, well, Moose Jaw, I get their pizza ads because I love their taco pizza. I keep getting those on Facebook, which I got to get back up to the Dells again. But it's the I think it's Phil's, maybe the place that your food comes out on a train. I keep getting ads for them too, and I got to get back up there because they have great food. Anyway, Trisha says 3 words: Avon lady calling. My parents were both teachers, so they didn't have much in the way of odd jobs, but my mom got in deep with Avon for a while. I remember flipping to the kids section whenever the catalog arrived. Also, my husband has a pretty cool side job. He manages online sales for a local comics store. Initially, he was paid in comics, but sales have really taken off so that he makes a stipend, or as I call it, the Disney Fund. Isn't that kind of what we do as Disney fans, right? We have a kind of I guess they call it now a side hustle. Your side hustle is basically your Disney account or your Disney fund, so you can, pay for your trips. I mean, that's kind of why I started as a travel agent. I wanted to be able to go down to Disney a little bit more than I could. My wife and I are both teachers. We made diddly do. It was really hard to be able to go down, even to be able to go to the All Stars, and we drove, and we only ate counter service. And we never got the park hopper. But we didn't care. Like, we still got to go. Like, seriously, those were the best trips. I have no problems with how we went, even as poor teachers. Those are the best days. But I'm glad that I was able to grow my business into a point where I can support my family through the podcast and through booking travel. And it's because of your support. So thank you so much for that. And every night when I go to bed, and I do say prayers, and I'm very grateful each night that folks like you support our small business and our podcast, because you could turn this off at any time. And I'm glad that we've built a relationship that we can, share these memories together and hopefully put smiles on each other's faces each day, because when you comment on stuff on social media or you leave feedback here, whatever it is, that we have this community, this family, it just warms my heart, and your support means so much. All right, Trisha has some feedback here. She says, my parents were both school teachers, funny, the same as Trisha's above, and they painted houses in the summer. I thought they just liked painting, didn't realize it was for extra income. A couple of things there, Trisha. First of all, isn't that love? Because when you get older, you realize your parents probably didn't like painting. They probably just loved you so much that they did do physical labor so that you could probably have things that you otherwise couldn't afford, whether it was to be able to play baseball like I did. I got to play some select baseball, which I didn't know it at the time, how expensive it was, because my parents never told me. But I know now that I have Paige and Mallory, how expensive sports and stuff like that are. They're breathtakingly expensive sometimes. But it was out of love that your parents do things for you, but more importantly, they hide that from you. Maybe they do look like they're enjoying going to paint the houses because they don't want you to ever stress about that. They want you to do my thing that Pam and I, my wife, we always said when we were raising our kids, Paige and Mallory, is we wanted them to be kids as long as they possibly could be. We didn't want them to ever worry about adult things. And so we never wanted them to ever stress about things like money, or anything. We wanted to shield them from the real world as long as possible. We wanted them to hold on to that innocence of childhood as long as possible. And I know not everybody probably agrees with that, because maybe you're saying you're keeping your kids away from what the real world is, but we never wanted our kids to ever know about how much things really cost. I didn't want them to think about, oh, well, I don't want to do this one thing because it's expensive. No, I mean, if it was something that was a passion of theirs, I didn't want them to think about, oh, it costs money. Like, we'll figure it out. If you wanted to play on this great select soccer team and it was expensive for Paige's and Paige's sake, we figured it out. If we had to get another job or we had to shift the way we spent money in another way, we made it happen. But we were really about that, making it happen for our kids. And the funniest other thing, Trisha, about that is I think that must be a teacher thing, the painting houses, because a lot of teachers in our school district painted in the summer. Like, they either painted houses for like a private company, or our school district would actually hire the teachers to go around and paint the school district buildings in the summertime. Like, go inside the high school and paint the hallways, paint the restrooms, paint the gymnasiums, wherever they needed paint. And the funny thing is, like, you know, if they would have hired me, I'm not artistic at all. I mean, and you weren't like painting art, you were just painting like walls. You paint the walls white, you'd paint some trim with like maybe like a trim color blue or something in our district's color. But I just think I wouldn't do quality work. But I don't think, maybe the district wasn't looking for quality work, because a lot of our schools kind of look like prisons. So they weren't the most beautiful places to be. But yeah, that's interesting. I love this feedback. It's so cool. All right, so that's all the feedback we have for odd jobs. I know it was a busy week and a lot of folks were traveling, so that's what we have. But if your parents had odd jobs, we can still get it in. So go to patreon.com/be our guest podcast and leave that for next week's show. Okay, so here's what I have for today's topic. And I'm really, really curious about this in your part of the world, wherever you are. And I was thinking about this because there's a meme that goes around social media every now and then, but it hits home with me it cracks me up every time. Every time I see it, because this guy is from Florissant, Missouri, where I grew up, like my small town. He's from there, and he's semi-famous, but not really famous, and he's a bowler. He was a bowler on the PBA tour, the Pro Bowlers Association. His name's Pete Weber. And there's this meme that goes around every once in a while, and I don't even know what the background of this thing is, but it shows him bowling, and he gets this strike, and he just goes bananas. And he's all about himself. He takes he gets his strike, and he always bowls in sunglasses, like he is God's gift to bowling, which drives me nuts. But he's funny to watch. So he bowls, and he hits this strike, and he must have won the tournament, I'm guessing. And it must have been on ESPN or ABC or something. And the camera shows him, and then it shows his wife, and it shows the crowd all cheering. But he's all about, he's got his two thumbs up, and he's pointing at himself. Me, me, me. I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest. This guy's a bowler. He didn't just win the World Series. He's not like the greatest boxing champion of all time, or, he didn't just win the Nobel Peace Prize or anything like that. He just won a bowling tournament. But he goes bonkers, and people use this as a meme on social media, and it cracks me up because he is from Florissant, Missouri. I know where his dad's house was. It was right near where I grew up, because his dad owned a bowling alley in Florissant where I grew up. That's where we always went bowling, a lot of us. It was called Dick Weber Lanes, and his dad was a famous bowler before him. Pete was his son, Pete Weber, but Dick Weber, back, I believe, like in the 50s, was a famous professional bowler. Now, he was kind of before my time, but my father-in-law, who is an avid bowler, still is, he's a great bowler, would tell me stories about Dick Weber. And so I was curious about this, because we had a few bowling alleys around our town. And I'm talking about where I grew up, in the city of Florissant, Missouri, which was in North St. Louis County, not where I live now, because I'm living in St. Charles now. But I, I believe this is true. And this is just an assumption from my Midwestern background, is that the heart of some small Midwestern towns is kind of like the local roller rink and maybe the local bowling alley for kids, and also maybe the local arcade, especially in the 80s. But I think those 3 places and the shopping mall. So maybe those 4 places are kind of the places where kids gather and make a lot of memories in the Midwest. And maybe it's true on the East Coast, maybe it's true on the West Coast, or maybe it's true in other countries. So let me know. This is really what I want to hear. Patreon.com/BRGS podcast, because I really am curious about this perspective. But here's what I know in my town. We had a couple of major, not major, but the 2 bowling alleys that we went to the most, again, were Dick Weber Lanes and Crest Bowl, CREST, like the toothpaste. And they were both about equal distant from our house, probably about 5 minutes away. Crest Bowl was not quite as fancy as Dick Weber Lanes. Dick Weber Lanes was a AMF lanes or something. It was a little fancier. The lanes looked nicer. But Crest Bowl was kind of in the heart of Florissant, like the downtown, the historic part of our town. And my grandma Eileen, so my mom's mother, bowled in a league there for years and years. And so I do have memories of going up to Crest Bowl, and it was during the week, on an evening. And sometimes it'd be a treat to go watch my grandma bowl. And I was young, but watching grandma bowl in her ladies league, I guess it was. The thing I do remember about bowling alleys, though, this was probably in the late 70s, early 80s, was how smoky they were. Because I had asthma as a kid. I had severe asthma. And if I would go in this bowling alley, I mean, it would be just a haze in that place. There was so much smoke. But bowling alleys were so intriguing because they had arcade games. They were loud. You always heard the because this bowling at both these bowling alleys, I believe, were 24 lanes or maybe 32 lanes. They were pretty large. And they were almost always full. And so you're constantly hearing the balls hitting the ground, hitting the lanes, and then the balls hitting the pins. It's kind of like an arcade where you had like that constant sound that was exciting because you had the sound of the lanes, you had the sound of arcade games, there were jukeboxes playing because there was a huge snack bar, and there was actually a bar in both of these bowling alleys, Dick Weber and Crest Bowl. And there was actually a daycare center in both of them. I don't know if your bowling alley had one of these where if the parents were bowling in a bowling league, you could drop your kids off, and there was a child care center, like a daycare corner in there where they had it set up where there was like a babysitter in there, and there were toys and stuff, and the kids would just stay in there, the little kids, and the parents could bowl, and then you pick up your kid when you were done bowling. I mean, I don't think any bowling alleys have that anymore. I haven't gone bowling for a while, but that was a natural thing. But the thing I remember though was that bowling alleys, both Crest and Dick Weber, and I probably went to Crest more than I went to Dick Weber. I think it was a little bit cheaper, but bowling alleys were kind of like mini arcades because they both of these bowling alleys that I'm speaking of, I remember had about 10 video games. They'd have like pole position, excite bike. They would have a few maybe pinball machines. I remember one had Frogger. And it was exciting to go there, kind of like it was exciting to go to the roller rink. Now, I grew up at a roller rink. We've talked about that many times. I grew up in a skating rink because my next door neighbors owned the skating rink. They babysat me. I was at a skating rink probably 6 days a week for my whole childhood. I grew up on skates. But when I wasn't there, I would go to these bowling alleys occasionally, probably maybe once every couple of weeks. Now, my dad also bowled in a Sunday night bowling league for years at Dick Weber Bowling Lane. So I spent a lot of time there. And I actually bowled in an after school bowling league for my North County Christian school when I was in 6th grade. So a bunch of the kids from that school, after school, we would go to Crest Bowl. This was at Crest Bowl, and we would bowl 2 games, and we had a little league there. Now, the funny thing about that is all these bowling leagues or both these bowling alleys would have their bar area, and they both had big screen TVs. And I do remember that I got to see Ozzie Smith hit that incredible home run where he was batting left-handed. It was the first left-handed home run he had ever hit in his career against the Los Angeles Dodgers in the playoffs in 1985 at Crest Bowl. The place went absolutely bonkers. And I also saw the play in the 1985 World Series when the Cardinals played the Kansas City Royals, where Don Dinkinger blew the call at first base when we got the guy out at first base. Todd Worrell covered first and clearly out, but Dinkinger called him safe and the wheels fell off the bus for the Cardinals. That was while my dad was bowling in his Sunday night bowling league at Dick Weber, and the place went bonkers over there too. So there two big Cardinal memories for me happened at these two bowling alleys. So those are some of my bowling alley memories. Now, a couple other things that I remember about bowling alleys is that for some reason, my dad tended to take me to bowling alleys on Saturday afternoons, and they were not as busy on Saturday afternoons. It seemed like they were a lot of people that would bowl in leagues on weeknights. They would be very busy. And then on weekends, so basically in the evenings, the bowling alleys were always busy. But my dad would tend to take me on like a Saturday afternoon at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Again, my dad was in a band on Saturday night. So I guess this is probably why we did that. So we could do something together. Because my dad liked to bowl. He, again, like I said, he was in a bowling league. But the funny thing is that Saturday afternoons were kind of a weird time for me when I grew up because it was like you didn't know what you were going to do on Saturday afternoons. Saturday afternoons were fun, but they were just kind of a wild card thing for me. Like sometimes we'd be up at the skating rink on Saturday afternoons because every Saturday afternoon at our skating rink, we had a matinee session from 2 to 4. So many times I would go up there and just hang out and because I was always up there with my neighbors. But sometimes he would take us bowling. And so we'd either go to Dick Weber or Crest. But there was also this other bowling alley, which I think it was called Hall's Ferry Lanes. It was super small, and maybe you had one of these kind of bowling alleys in your town. Super kind of shady. Like it was in a strip mall. It only had about 10 lanes, and you had to go in like on the lower level of the strip mall, but it was, I mean, the lanes were, I guess, regulation length, but you could bowl super cheap there. Didn't really have a bar, kind of had like a little snack area, but it was just like small and dumpy and shady. But sometimes we'd go there because I think my dad probably wanted to practice, but the price was right. And you could probably get in really easy there. But I remember that place up on Newhouse Ferry Road if you're from St. Louis. Um, but it's one of those things that Saturday afternoons, you go bowling sometimes, you would go skating. I remember sometimes we just go to Dairy Queen and get, a Mr. Misty. Remember those back in the day? Or I don't even know if they had blizzards back then, an ice cream cone, but it was like a wild card. But a lot of the times we ended up at bowling alleys, and bowling alleys were important to Florissant because you would run into a lot of your friends there. Because even when my dad was bowling in that Sunday night bowling league, I would go every week, even though I wasn't in the league. It was an adult league, but it was just fun to go with my dad because they would bowl for probably 2 hours. And so at the end of my weekend, this was when I was in elementary school, probably like fourth, fifth, sixth grade. I would just go to the bowling alley and you'd run into other kids. And, maybe my dad would give me a couple of bucks. I could play the video games or I could, put a couple of quarters. They had a jukebox. But even when your money ran out, you would just hang out at the bowling alley with other kids and just go up and down, watch people bowl, watch TV, and just hang out. And that's what I wonder about is where we live now. We do have, and I haven't been in there, but we have an old dumpy looking bowling alley called Harvest Lanes, which is across the highway from where we live. And it looks very old, which I'm very excited about. I need to get over there because I think it would take me back to Crest Bowl and Dick Weber Lanes. I don't think it's changed much from the 80s, judging by the outside of it. On the opposite side of that, we have this other place that's a bowling alley, but I mean, it's like a mega building. I think it has bowling and laser tag. And I mean, this place is huge and it has everything. It has a jungle gym, it has an arcade, it has trampolines. It has everything. So it's a little bit of everything. And I think that bowling alleys by themselves maybe are going the way of the dinosaur, and they're turning into these venue or multidisciplinary entertainment complexes, these huge buildings, which are fun. And I mean, kids, I guess nowadays, bowling by itself is probably kind of boring because I know even when I was, kind of wrapping up college and even when I was teaching, a lot of us would go out on Saturday nights and we go bowling. But a lot of times it was like bowling. I forget what they called it, but they would turn out all the lights and they had like a DJ, and so you would bowl in the dark with like glow in the dark balls, and there was a DJ playing. So it was pretty wild. Like the pins glue in the dark were glow in the dark pins. It was pretty wild. But I mean, again, everything has to be so extreme nowadays. Like, is it so boring that you can't bowl a game anymore with just bowling? It has to be laser bowling in the dark with a DJ, or you got to have five other things in the building to do besides your bowling game. I don't know. So, what's the state of bowling in your town? Was the bowling alley in your town when you grew up kind of a place like a social event or a social destination like the roller rink or like the mall? Was it like that for you? Because it was for me. Like we would hit the bowling alley at least once a month, probably more than that. And it was just a place that you and your friends would meet up. And sometimes you bowled, sometimes you didn't. Sometimes you just go with your parents or your grandparents. But the bowling alley, the smoky bowling alley back in the 70s and 80s was kind of an essential part of our town. And I wonder about your town as well. So let's talk about it on next week's show. Just kind of a random topic, but that's kind of how it was here in North St. Louis County in the Midwest. So let's talk about it next week. But until we get back together again, I hope you all stay safe, stay healthy, and have a tremendous week. We'll see you real soon.